Pfizer executive Jordan Walker was just caught on camera by Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. Now, for those of you who are not familiar whatsoever at this point in time with Project Veritas, these are the secret, hidden video guys that go out there and typically find very beautiful women to pretend to be interested, and very loserish guys who are willing to spill all and tell all. And in the process of this, we've heard some interesting things about what's going on in school boards, and most recently, what's going on at Pfizer. So Jordan Walker, who is a Pfizer employee from all accounts, from everything that we can tell, even though there has been some question as to whether or not this guy was just absolutely lying about everything. We'll get to that after you see the video in just a moment. But needless to say, in this video, you'll see Jordan Walker, supposedly and presumably a Pfizer employee, talking about the mutation of viruses at Pfizer for the protection of us all. So here's that.
Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID?
Well, that is not what we say to the public. The virus keeps mutating.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, like, why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we can create unsubstantially develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of, like, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. You have to be, like, very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something that, like, goes everywhere. So you're not supposed to do gain function research with the viruses, like, they recommend not. But you do, like, these, like, selected directional mutations to try to see if you can make more potent.
Yeah.
So there is research ongoing about that. I don't know how that's going to work. It's pretty good for the industry, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's bad for everyone else in America.
So suffice to say, if what we see on this video is legitimate, and I'll show you why I think we should take it as legitimate, I think we need to be very alarmed and have our eyes wide open. Because we have people in the biggest places and the biggest institutions of our society lying to us, and doing so on a regular basis, and doing it in ways that are of the utmost importance, especially when it comes to global viruses that were most definitely not created in a lab, like Jordan seems to be saying is happening presently at Pfizer. Now, does he work for Pfizer? This has been the big question, because he claims in the video that he was lying and just doing so to try to impress somebody while he was on a date. Here's him saying that.
Hey there, is this seat taken? You work for Pfizer. My question for you is, why does Pfizer want to hide from the public the fact that they're mutating the COVID viruses?
Is this real life? I'm literally a liar. I was trying to impress a person on a date by lying. This is absurd.
Please don't touch me. Well, this is not. Why don't tell anybody.
Someone who's just working at a company to literally help the public. You up. You really did.
So as you see that, I just have a question to ask you. Do you think adults are typically more responsive to affirmation or incredibly resistant to correction? And which attitude do you think is on display as we look at this adult man having a meltdown? So here's just a tip. If we're going to learn how to discern and try to tell the truth, which is actually the only reason I, as a Christian, am even concerned in this story in the first place, is how do we know when people are telling us the truth? So here's a little game that I play, and maybe it'll be helpful to you. It's a game called Common Sense. So the game goes like this. In this scenario, Project Veritas could have staged this whole thing. This Jordan guy is just simply, he's not a Pfizer employee. He was staged by James O'Keefe. And all of this is a big lie to get clicks for Project Veritas. Okay, so that's scenario one. Scenario two here is this guy actually is a Pfizer employee, and he was caught red-handed doing what half of the country thinks that places like Pfizer are already doing with viruses. So you play that game, and you tell me which scenario makes more sense to you. But I will just tell you that it doesn't help when places like Forbes magazine and other news outlets continue to do yeoman's work for lies and for liars. Rather than objectively journalizing, they do things like this. Tucker Carlson has claimed on his Fox News show, Tucker Carlson Tonight, that there's been a near total media blackout of this story. But since there doesn't seem to be any type of memo circulating to journalists telling them not to cover this story, let's cover it now and see how much Veritas it really has. So already from the outset, we get from this writer at Forbes magazine contradicting and coming skeptically to this story. Now, objective journalism can sometimes be skeptical in nature, except when there is zero evidence to be skeptical and a lot of questions to be asked. So you can see this cynical article is already intended to try to prove that Project Veritas doesn't actually have the goods. Now, what's their case for that? Well, of course, they don't have any actual evidence, but instead they have this. Wow, a Pfizer exec bragging about Frankenstein science. That sounds like a monstrous revelation, doesn't it? But before Carlson's claim makes you sit bolt upright in your chair, keep in mind that this was Carlson who had said this. Yes, this was Tucker Carlson, whom John Oliver has called a super spreader. Well, if John Oliver called him a super spreader, well then how in God's name could we possibly listen to such a guy? I mean, obviously, John Oliver is the trusted source here and not your lying eyes, but trust me, it gets even better. The video appeared to be an undercover video because the footage was rather grainy and filmed at a rather awkward angle. It looked like the type of video taken to prove that someone's significant other is doing more than with the office manager than officing and managing. This video featured someone described by Project Veritas as Jordan Tristan Walker, Pfizer Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations in mRNA Scientific Planning, answering questions from an unidentified interviewer. So you could either take Project Veritas's or Carlson's word for it, or search for his name on Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo yourself. After all, someone with that kind of title should be fairly easy to find on the internet, right? Well, a Google search didn't really reveal any legitimate source that could verify the person's name and title. Similarly, a search on LinkedIn doesn't reveal any such verifiable profiles either. Just some accounts trying to spread his name. Some of these accounts are spelling the name slightly differently. All right, so there you go. The only evidence that this writer over at Forbes has is that they couldn't find this person's name at Pfizer. Now, I've never tried to really locate Pfizer employees, and I don't really know how the structure works over there, but I would suggest that just because this person was not easy to find could mean possibly two things, especially based on the reaction of our dear friend Jordan Walker. One, Jordan was scrubbed from the internet shortly after this event because he knows the implications of what he just did could be damning for Pfizer. It could take that big pharma industry right down to the ground. Now, I was reliably informed by Joe Biden that he's not in bed with Big Pharma, and he hates Big Pharma, in fact, and he is ready to stick up for the man. But why is it that the left-wing media is really, really quick to defend Pfizer rather than to ask questions about the reliability of what this guy is claiming? Now, of course, are they going to go to Pfizer and ask? Are they going to go to the CEO over there or try to do their own investigative research? Of course not. Here's what they're going to do. They're going to name call Tucker Carlson because that's what responsible journalists do that wear big boy pants. I mean, I'm only being this tongue-in-cheek for one reason. I remember a time when journalists actually took stories seriously and that their job was not to defend Big Pharma, but their job was to actually investigate Big Pharma. It wasn't so long ago, and it's not that we can't get back to that place, but as long as we sit idly by and just say, well, this doesn't matter, this is just Project Veritas at it again, it's just more white noise, it's more outrage, rather than an opportunity, one, for us to learn how to discern when someone is telling us the truth and to try to weigh evidence and to weigh the options that are before us. But also, two, for us to realize, so one of two things. One, that you need to be able to think for yourself about different things that you hear, and you need to be able to weigh evidence effectively. But then the second thing is this, is that you need to also know at this point in time, if you don't already, you cannot trust the mainstream media, and you need to source your information as much as you can on your own. Do not take anybody's word for it. Sure, don't take Project Veritas's word for it, but certainly don't take this cynical writer over at Forbes and their word for it. Just because it comes from Project Veritas or Tucker Carlson doesn't mean it's a lie. This is something called the Fox News fallacy. Just because the truth comes from somebody that you don't like, all of a sudden you don't believe it. This is a lesson in throwing your brains in the garbage. I see this all the time, by the way, in things that I do of a more Christian nature. Whenever I'm talking about the Bible or talking about Jesus, people immediately hear religious subjects on on the lips of a commentator like myself, and they will run to the comments section with brains and hands ready to throw into the garbage, and they will immediately attack Christianity and immediately attack the Bible as some book that was carried around by shepherds. And it's like what shepherds are you even talking about? Like, it's the most ridiculous nonsense. People are very quick to get emotional and throw their brains in the garbage when they don't actually have a good argument, because the vast majority of people don't think for themselves. And by way of reminder, because I get this a lot on the show, thinking for yourself doesn't mean just coming up with the truth on your own. It means sourcing information, because that's the point I'm trying to get at. Make sure that you get as much information as you possibly can, ask as many questions as you possibly can, and then, surprise, you might actually have an informed opinion, unlike most of what we get from the lamestream media. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video, so you definitely need to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.